I am so excited to have you in Module 8, all about connecting with others. Welcome. Today, it's going to be me and the sweet baby Yoda teaching this module, and I am very, very excited. So I hope you're as excited about the baby Yoda on my shirt as I am. I'm a baby Yoda fan. Okay, so now that I've gotten my little Yoda tangent out of the way, let's talk about connecting with others. I am so excited that you are in this module. I hope that you've been doing all the workbooks up to this point, and that it's just been massively, massively transformational for you so far. So, first thing I want to talk about, and I have talked about it throughout the course of this program, is just the beautiful and miraculous diversity that we have within this world, right? Within our planet. We'll just start there because there are so many things I bet we don't even know about. You're just going to hear my chair squeaking this whole time. But just this beautiful diversity of the world. And, of course, that's physically, culturally, mentally, experientially, in all of these different facets. This world is so diverse. And if you were to look at I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like the idea of the immense amount of outcomes and variety and all of these things based on the diversity in each of these different areas, just the unique outcomes of each and every one of us between physically, culturally, mentally, experientially, all these things, right? And even more, just creates such a diverse world, okay? So even though we are all so very, very different in so many, many ways, we are all so connected because of that, and we should be connected by that. And I think that's what's such a beautiful thing. So I want to challenge you to play with this idea of removing the hierarchy that has been so very ingrained in us for a lot of us. And I can't speak to every culture, to every region, to every place, but I think that a lot of this too stems from a very white supremacist way of doing things and of seeing things, of there being a better and a less than, of there being this hierarchy, basically. So I want you to just kind of play with this idea for yourself, because when you start to play with this idea, it's going to help you connect to others so much better. And to give you some just kind of grounded examples of removing the hierarchy in a mental way, although I'm all down for let's remove it in a very physical way too, and in our structures and systems and things. But just because one person has a college degree and another doesn't mean that there is not value from the person without the degree and there's more value from the person with the degree. So, just it's removing those kinds of biases that create a hierarchy in our heads. That, again, just because maybe somebody has a house and somebody else is homeless doesn't mean that person is not worth listening to or doesn't have immense value to bring into this world. It also doesn't mean that that person doesn't have that with a home that doesn't have so much to learn or also so much to offer. We're all so unique in our experiences and in our personalities and in who we are and how we've lived, that to create this hierarchy seems kind of mind-blowing to me, and it's something that I continue to explore. But it's like, who's to say who's better or more qualified, and who's to say that somebody else, or not more qualified, but who's to say somebody else isn't? Just because maybe you've gone through these certain paths or channels. So, try to remove that hierarchy in your head. This is something I've even put into practice all the way down to bugs. If I find a spider in my house, my friend, I catch it and I put it outside. I don't think that I'm any better. I just see that spider maybe wanted some shelter, just like I do. But again, I'm going to put it in somewhere where it can maybe thrive better than in my house. And I can be, I can be comfortable. So you kind of get my point here. You take that as far as you want, but again, that the invitation is for you to begin to explore this concept, and kind of seeing that we can learn from other people, from life itself, from nature, from experiences, from animals and plants. Like we have, everything's just so diverse that we can connect with each other when we don't devalue another person, especially another person. So, how do we create this connection, right? It can be through conversation. It can be through education. It can be through respectful association. So, how can you maybe associate, creating a relation between another person and yourself? Because honestly, that can help create empathy, and being like, oh, I'm finding similarities here, or I'm finding patterns here, and I want to explore that more, and maybe we can find, I can hear more about the differences, and things like that. There are so many ways to create connection. This is going to be, of course, a very, very broad topic, but I think it's a very necessary topic, and something that we have to go over, especially because my mission is to better the mental health of this planet. And to do that, we need to love ourselves, and we also need to love other people. And so when we can better connect with other people, that's when we make that happen. And being able to better connect with other people starts with being able to connect better to ourselves. Because if there's a disconnect in here, how in the world are we supposed to connect better with something outside of us if we're already trying to, I just imagine what are those, I sound ridiculous, but those plug boards. Anyway, I'm imagining people like VCRs on the inside, basically. You get what I'm saying, though. We want to, those are just a few ways that we can create connection. So, the basis here is that when we build up our own self-love and trust, right? And that's what we've done, right? Phase 1 was all about building up that self-love within ourselves. Oh my gosh, a cat. You're welcome. Welcome to my life. Phase 2 was all about gaining that self-control, which helps build trust within ourselves and how we show up and what we're capable of and all those good things, right? And even self-love from all the way up to the last module, or up-leveling identity, right? So when we build up our own self-love and trust, we can feel safer in exploring other people's perspectives. That's a game changer. It's a massively valuable thing, because we don't feel attacked. We don't feel threatened. We don't feel like we have to defend, or we have to prove or justify, right? We can be very safe and secure and very open all at the same time. It's possible. So, that's really kind of at the core of this. And on top of that, right, wanting for others, the core of what we want for ourselves, right? To be supported, to be accepted, to be heard, seen, valued, treated with kindness, all in the uniqueness of who we are, right? It's a diverse world. We are all very unique. So what if we could, be all those things for ourselves, right? Supported, accepted, seen, heard, valued, treated with kindness in the uniqueness of who we are. And we also wanted that for everybody else. That even in their uniqueness, we want to support them and accept them and hear them and see them and value them and treat them with kindness, right? And we want that for not only ourselves, but for other people. Because if we want it for ourselves, we would want somebody to reciprocate that and to give that to us as well, right? So can you imagine, for a second, can you imagine the shift that would take place on this planet if everyone came from this place? Everyone. Can you imagine? There wouldn't be these massive fears and insecurities and feeling the need to defend and to fight and to take and to overpower and to demean, right? All of those things, because everyone would be so settled in to who they are. if we can live as that example when we're connecting with other people, whether it's friends, family, our kids, right? If we can live as that example, it can encourage other people to do the same. Because right now, I think a lot of people don't know any different than what we've had, right? So I feel a lot of feels right now. This is just very powerful stuff. And, and I hope you feel that, and I hope you see that, and I hope you're like, yes, I want that too. Because the more people we have in that space, the more people we have not saying, I'm right, you're wrong. The more people we have saying, I love and accept myself as who I am. Tell me about who you are and how you're different from me. Or how you're the same as me, right? It's all connecting. It would change a lot. It would change a lot. And we wouldn't have these mental illnesses fueling, right? Because they feed off of fear and worry and loss of control. That's what they feed off of. Okay. Gotta bring it back in. Gotta reel it back in. I could go on with this forever. But I want to share with you my standard for communication. Now, this is my standard. I can't tell you how to talk. Can't tell you how to communicate with people. But I'm going to give you my standard. And I want, up front, I'll explain to you the reason I have this standard, and you may agree with it or not, and that's completely up to you. So my standard for communication is what I call the CKC, which is calm, kind, and constructive. Okay? Now, again, I've mentioned this before, but this is not about tone policing. This is not about being like, I'm trying to communicate with you. Be calm, kind, and constructive with me. Like, speak kinder to me. No. This is more so for how we want to show up, right? And the reason I choose calm, kind, and constructive is because for me, and hopefully for you, it is the best way to be intentional with how we show up and communicate, and also intentional with how we exert our emotions. I do believe emotions are a good thing. They need to be felt. But I also am a big advocate for, I want to make sure I set up the best possible way to be heard. And not everybody is going to hear you when you're calm, kind, and constructive. Hands down, I understand that. I have been calm, kind, and constructive and not been able to communicate well with another person. We can only control our side. We can't control other people. And so, again, that's where I'm not trying to tell you that in order to be heard, you have to be calm, kind, and constructive. But, that's always kind of my standard that I like to go to and I like to start with. Because for me, it's how I feel most in control of myself, and it's how I feel healthiest mentally going into any kind of communication. So whether that is approaching, my kids, whether that is, if they're like screaming or, I want to get support and have them do something, right? Or whether it's with my husband and we're trying to communicate on maybe a better way of doing things so we can both feel supported. Maybe it's also replying to a very nasty message I've gotten on the internet. This is my standard for communication. I'm going to break it down for you, so don't worry. But this is kind of how I always show up, and that's just my choice. So again, this is something you can take or leave, but I want to share it with you because I do think it's massively powerful, okay? So we'll start with calm, which is, really starting with being mindful of emotions so you can be clear and intentional, okay? And this might look like doing a little pre-prep. If you know a conversation's coming, right? Being like, okay, I know that this is something that might get me worked up. It might make me feel really sad or really angry. So I'm aware of that. This is how I'm going to step in, right? Tackling triggers. Also, these are the points that I want to make. This is what I want to get across. I really want to make sure I say this, and I share this part of my perspective, and not make any jumping to conclusions, but I want to, share this. So you could do some kind of pre-prep. You can also, I've had students I've ended up in situations where you're caught off guard and all of a sudden you're in this conversation and you like get the whoosh of emotions and you're like, oh, I'm not ready for this. And you can very, kindly ask, hey, can I just have a moment? I want to continue this conversation with you, but can I just have a moment? Maybe you need to collect yourself for a second so you can have a really good conversation with them, or you need to run to the bathroom really quick, but you want to come back and speak with them about this. Just kind of letting them know hey, I need to collect myself, but I want to come back to this, so please don't think I'm trying to just push you off. I think that's very valuable. So then you can kind of, again, step away, collect your emotions, do a 5-minute break if you need to, do a little pre-prep, and then come back out, right? It's just so you can stay calm and centered in how you show up, because if you've ever tried to have a conversation while you're crying, while you're raging, while you're anxious AF, then you know that it's really kind of hard to keep yourself on track when those things are just running rampant. And I know I've even had conversations with people where they got pretty upset with me because I was very calm in the conversation, and I'm like, look, this is just me processing what I'm hearing, and so I can speak to you with kindness and constructive, words. So, just calm. So I just started off as just trying to be as calm as possible. That conversation did also result in tears and things. So, don't expect to keep it calm the whole way through if it's a tougher conversation. Again, this is just the standard, the baseline, the starting point of what I always like to go in with. The next one is kind, and so again, this is speaking from your perspective only, not telling them what they're doing or what they're making it mean. Speak solely from your perspective, as in hey, this happened the other day, and for me, I felt really unsupported, and maybe that wasn't your intention, but that's just how I was feeling. So speaking from your perspective. Also, on this note of kindness, right? Listening to theirs. Don't cut them off. Don't be the only one talking, right? You would want somebody to hear you, be able to hear them. Listen to their perspective, even if you don't agree with it. Listen, right? And again, trying to keep a common ground of, all right, I hear you, and I'm understanding you, and staying connected in that sense. It's just very kind to be able to speak your truth, listen to somebody else's truth, and kind of keep that going by keeping that common ground of really acknowledging each other, right? Oh, for you, you're going to acknowledge them. But with this, you can take deep breaths, pauses, be mindful of your tone. That is something I do try to be mindful of is my tone, because I know for me, I can get really sassy. And so I can be like, yeah, sure. I can get really nasty with the tone of my voice. And it's not always how I want to present myself anyway. So, being mindful of tone, taking breaths, choosing the words that you want, rather than being like, well, you're stupid, or this is whatever, how can you maybe change that to where, again, this is about being intentional, right? And also intentionally listening and not just being like, yeah, say your piece and then I'm going to talk, right? Hear them. This is where we get to sit in our self-love and go, okay, you can have your opinions, you can have your perspective. I don't need to necessarily be hurt by that, but I can listen to it and I can maybe learn from it, and maybe it'll expand how I'm even seeing the situation. Oh, I didn't realize that you were feeling that way. We can learn from each other. And then that kind of moves into the constructive piece, which is working together to create a solution. And this kind of comes in if you're more so in a situation where you're trying to resolve something or you're trying to grow something, with another person, right? This is where I think it's conversations that are constructive are very, very beneficial. And, this is where you can create suggestions yourself and put some on the table, but also ask for suggestions. Hey, if I do this, would that help? And then what would you like to do in order to help? And also talking about how you can keep each other accountable. So I gave this example a while ago, but, my husband and I, he was like, we basically went out to a gallery, like an art show, and he wanted to introduce me to all of his friends and stuff and the people that he knows. And when I'm in a social setting where at that time, I was still very much dealing with the B.A.D. And so when I was in a social setting where I didn't feel worthy, or I felt less than, or I felt small, I would make myself very small. And I'm very outgoing, very talkative, but I would make myself very small. And so throughout the night, I ended up just kind of reverting to a corner and not talking to anybody. And we made it back home, and he was like, I don't ever want to take you to anything like that again if that's how you're going to be. And it was it felt very harsh to me at the time, but I was like, I don't want that to be the case. Like, I still want to go out and do things with you. I don't want you to feel like you can't take me places, because this is kind of my response. How can we, I hear you that's frustrating for you because you know me one way and I'm showing up another way, and that feels conflicting. So I hear you, right? So how can we work together so that doesn't maybe happen in the future? And so the solution we came up with, I was like, hey, sometimes when you let me know in person, it feels like you're like, hey, you're being super rude because you're not talking to anybody. And that puts me on the defense. I want to be defensive about that. So I'm like, maybe the way we could communicate is you could tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you're doing that thing that you do. Do you want to work on that? And then I can know to step in, and you can kind of bring my awareness to it. And I was like, does that work for you, or would you rather do something different? And he was like, no, I think we could try that out. And I was like, okay, well, let's, and the accountability was like, okay, hey, we're going into this thing. Can you just make sure if that happens, you remind me? And so that's how we got constructive together. And you can kind of see, we both got to feel the way we wanted to feel. Because I too was like, this is just how I am. But again, that was something I didn't want that to impede on our time together, especially in social settings. So, that's just an example of a CK, calm, kind, constructive conversation or communication. So again, that's just my standard, and I hope you find that helpful. I will put that in the workbook along with the framework. And then let's go ahead and talk lastly about unpacking assumptions, because it's going to be the first part of the framework. And assumptions are just we can make assumptions about a lot of things, and assumptions are basically just they're basically assuming something as fact. So your perception of something, you then just see as fact, and you take it as fact, right? As opposed to speculating, where you're going, I wonder if that's the case for this person, or I wonder if this person is experiencing this. If my husband's late getting home, I could assume he's just flat out cheating on me and get really mad about it, or I could speculate, okay, I mean, maybe he could be cheating, or he could be picking up dinner or helping somebody with something. I don't know what he could be doing. I could speculate and stay kind of neutral about it, right? So there's a lot of assumptions we can make about other people. And those can be, again, mental assumptions about, what they might be thinking or what they believe or anything going on internally, right? There's also physical of, assuming we know somebody's health by the way they look, or what kind of person they are by the color of their skin, or by their mannerisms, or by their behavior, right? And so assuming that we just know what that person's like because of what we're seeing. That also can be emotional, right? And I think women may get the brunt of this a lot, is people assuming, she's emotional, she can't control herself, yada yada, or even with men like that, that assumption of, they shouldn't show emotion. And that kind of leads into stereotypical assumptions. Okay, we don't want to just assume about people and make general lump assumptions about things. Our brains love to categorize and to label things and folder things away, but we can't just take that as fact, okay? And that's where racism just stems from, is that like that flat out assumption. It might not be where it stems from, but that feeds into it. You understand what I mean? So the way we kind of start to break that apart is by not feeding all of these assumptions and thinking that we just know about people because of what we see or what we guess. Like, let's not go there. So yeah, these are just, these ways of connecting. And I hope this just opened you up to all of the different ways that we can connect on just different levels. So let's go ahead and go into the framework, because I think that's very important. It's also going to help kind of give this a process as well. I'm going to hiccup. I'm going to drink some water because my throat's dry. I'm not like a cute water sipper. I'm just like, draw it. Anyway, so the framework is seeing deeper. Okay, and we're going to break apart the word deeper. So again, first things first, don't assume. Honestly, I love to say assumptions ruin everything, because they tend to. So, make sure you speculate over assume. The way we see deeper into people is that we might speculate because our brains love stories and they like having answers. So we're free to speculate, but not just assume that's fact and that's truth because we've speculated it, right? So that's how you stop it from becoming an assumption. And then after you've speculated, you don't assume, right? You speculate. You then go into E, which is educate. So maybe you go and ask questions, or you do some like receptive learning. Maybe you read some books, or you listen to some people talk. You go in with a very curious perspective of, okay, I've speculated this, but now I want to educate myself about it, learn more about it, right? So that just helps to create more so an understanding and kind of marry, your speculation with what already exists out there. And then it moves into the next E, which is envision. And this is to put yourself in their shoes to create empathy, okay? So envision is you've speculated, you've learned a bit more. Now, can you envision what it's like to be in that space, right? And the purpose behind doing this is not to be like, I don't know, not to jump to any assumption, right? But it is to create empathy and create a feeling of understanding. And even though we can't directly know their experience because we are all so unique, right? We can create an understanding and a connection point through that empathy, right? We can then feel more for other people. So then that moves into P, which is peaceful interaction, okay? That's where you start having these calm, kind, and constructive conversations, or just conversations. If you don't want to have calm, kind, constructive ones, that's fine. But, I would say go in with a peaceful interaction, because from my perspective, and yes, this is my perspective, I understand this, but, I wouldn't want somebody, I wouldn't feel as apt to speak with somebody who is not trying to approach me peacefully. And I'm not trying to discredit anyone. I know that some people can have a lot of trauma, can feel a lot of anger, or can feel a lot of sadness, and that can definitely bleed over, and I don't think we should invalidate that or say that you shouldn't feel that way. But when it comes to interactions, I don't know. Me personally, I think it's very powerful to have those peaceful interactions. So again, I'm going to leave that up to you, but that's where my stance is on it, just because I know I've had many interactions that were not peaceful, and they weren't incredibly productive for me and for the other person. So that's where I sit with that. And I want you to know that I'm very aware, that I don't want to tone police anybody or tell you how you should speak. If you want to rage at somebody's face, rage at somebody's face. But I feel like we can be intentional about this. So that's where I sit with it. And the next is E, which is ears open. Listening is knowledge. And listening can come again in so many forms. So just make sure you're listening and really taking in that information. I remember I had one student that I was speaking with, and I was like, how are you liking this book? We were both reading it. And she was like, I couldn't finish it. And I asked her why. And she goes, she talks about God a lot in the book. And I was like, mm-hmm. And it was like, I can't really connect with that. It feels very disconnected for me. And I said, I felt the same way. But at the same time, I knew that even though that was a piece of her identity, there was still value there. Her perspective still, there was still so much I learned from that book. And she was like, I was like, I don't have to agree necessarily. I don't have to, be the same way or believe the same way as her, but it still was a very valuable book to me. And she was like, that is a really great way to see it. And she went and finished the book. And so, ears open, even if there are differences or you're like, oh, I don't know how to relate to that. That's okay. You can still learn, right? And that's what's beautiful about the diversity. So, and then lastly is R, which is relate, right? So creating connection through relating turns empathy, right? Feeling their feels into compassion, which is wanting to help. And I looked up the definition of compassion, and it was like wanting to help like the lesser or people that are suffering. And I'm gonna just cut that bit out, because I feel like compassion is not just helping those who are suffering. Compassion is wanting to help anyone. It's wanting to help, yourself, but also others. So that's my personal take on compassion. And I do feel like when we can relate, and again, with that book example, that was relating, of saying, I see her and I see that that's part of her identity. And, I may not believe the same way, but I still see how we're connected in other ways, in how we love to talk, and how we see mindset, or, you can find these little connection points. Again, they don't have to be identical, but you can find these connection points, because when you go, even if the connection point is that person's human and so am I, that can be your connection point, and that can turn empathy into compassion. And that's a really amazing thing. So let me recap really quick the Seeing Deeper framework. Don't assume, educate, envision, peaceful interaction, ears open, and relate. Okay? There is only one more module after this. Oh my gosh. So it's going to unlock after you're done with this one. I know. You're going to be like, I'm ready to finish. Please do the workbook. Go dive in, get that workbook done, do a lot of those reflective questions. You may actually find some areas where you're like, oh, I could be connecting with others a little better here. So you'll have the framework, actionable steps, and the journal prompts in there. So definitely go dive into that. And then I will see you in Module 9 without Baby Yoda, but he'll say bye. All about fearless growth, because that is how we're going to end this program. And please don't feel intimidated by Beat the Bad ending. Okay, I still got you. You still got the community. You got lifetime access to all the things. I know that coming towards the end of something can be really intimidating, and you're like, I'm not going to have this support anymore. I still got you. This isn't over, okay? Books, podcast, and I got a surprise coming your way, but don't quit now. Don't be intimidated by this being the end, okay? Don't rush through it because it's the end. You got this. You got this. So I will see you in Module 9, all about fearless growth.